Hi, welcome to the Murrow College Center for Student Success, Career Adaptability and Embracing the Change. I am Rebecca Cooney, panel moderator. I am a clinical associate professor of strategic communication at the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication. And with me today are two of our alumni, Rachel Romberg and Lance Slojiski, and I will let them introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel. Like Rebecca said, I was a student of hers. I graduated last year in May of 2019. I currently work at Amazon as an account executive for the advertising organization, and I'm living in West Seattle, working from home, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Hi, everybody. I am Lance, and I also was a student of Rebecca's, of Murrow College in general. I graduated in 2018. I worked for the Coog and the Land and a handful of other restaurants and bars and small businesses. And I'm back in Pullman now, specifically working with the Coog and the Land on a lot of different things in the middle of this crazy 2020. So that's me.
Great, thanks you guys. So if you have questions for either of them as we go along, please post those on, I think it's the Q&A on YouTube. And we'll definitely get those answered. Let's go ahead and start with Rachel. Why don't you tell the group a little bit more about what you do, your title, and kind of describe a little bit more about what you do every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So being an account executive at Amazon, specifically in the advertising organization, what I do is work with my book of business, who is consistent of 87 different small businesses that sell on Amazon. And my whole job every day is to help them figure out the right strategies for using our different products on Amazon advertising. So whether that be sponsored ads, which are your typical search ads, or even most of the time I'm working on larger scale branding techniques like DSP or demand side platform advertising. So those are going to be the bigger ads that kind of follow you around when you're searching for something on Amazon, end up not purchasing it, and then later on you're shown an ad that you're like, oh yeah, I actually was looking at that. I'm the person that helps those small businesses figure out the right strategy and how to spend their ad dollars.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. Lance, same question. Describe a little bit about what you do for the Coog and the Land and anything else.
Awesome. Yeah, so my role's kind of changed a little bit over the years. I'm thankful to say that I've actually been able to stay connected with the Coog for a long time. Since about 2016 is when I was brought on as a social media intern while I was still in school. My studies focused on journalism media production at first and then public relations later, with some studying in gender studies as well. And most recently, I've been spending a lot of time on their social media again. But in the last year, I kind of distanced myself from that a little bit and created teams and structure and systems for people to be able to do, small businesses specifically, to be able to do social media well, whether it be their own staff doing that work, or the owners themselves, whatever works best for those establishments. And so recently with the Land and the Coog, at the beginning of the year, before kind of COVID content, which is a real thing now, before COVID content kind of became the primary focus for restaurants and bars specifically, I was helping the Land, which is loosely tied with the Coog in regards to ownership and management, but I was helping them launch their brand and really determine what that brand is or wanted to be. And then we were building up towards a grand opening that was canceled because of the initial shutdown. The grand opening was supposed to be the week after spring break. And then the Coog, similarly, I was leading we had a social media team at the time that's a lot smaller now. And we had some very talented interns that have been helping us with COVID content as well. But at that point, we were just navigating events and preparing to structure the next generation, the second year of our team at the Coog for social media. And quickly that became something where I had to apply crisis comm and health comm stuff that I wasn't totally familiar with, but my background in journalism was helpful with that. And I was able to really, I have been able to help guide these particular restaurants and bars that are, the hospitality industry in particular is in a really weird spot with COVID and shutdowns and different regulations and phases and whatnot. So being able to communicate that clearly, whether a website or graphic design content or social media posts or whatever, that's kind of where the director part of my job has shifted into, in spite of it being for small businesses. It's a little bit of management, but it's a lot of moving pieces and projects and people, and making sure that that all works well and is consistently and clearly communicated.
Great. So the theme of today is change and adaptability to change. So Lance, you touched on it quite a bit. So Rachel, why don't you talk a little bit about how things have changed for you since March, maybe where you were before, were you going into an office and now you're working from home? So maybe just talk a little bit about how your role has shifted in this pandemic time.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started back in July of last year at Amazon, and it was my first time commuting from kind of a suburb to downtown. It would take me quite a while to get downtown, and I worked in one of the big offices in SLU on the 22nd floor, and I loved it. I was in a very, very like incorporative community. My team was all sitting pretty closely with each other, and we really rely on each other in the day-to-day world, especially before COVID, sitting next to each other, hearing different ideas, how they're talking with their advertisers, would a lot of times reflect on how I would continue conversations with mine. So when COVID hit and we were all told to work from home, we really thought it was only going to be a couple of weeks and we'd be back in the office. And here we are, well into July, and I've actually completed more of my role now at home than I have in office. So we really had to learn how to adapt. A lot of that for the team means frequent video calls and still trying to be really communicating with each other, and still sharing different ideas and different techniques and what's working for their advertisers, especially during COVID. Our advertisers have been adversely affected as well, which really changed my job. So advertisers went from, and to be clear, when I say advertisers, I mean like sellers on Amazon. So these are the small businesses that I'm helping figure out their advertising. They went from getting orders frequently to not receiving any orders at all, just due to Amazon prioritizing essential products, right? So I totally support that move. I think that was awesome, but it did cause a bit of, an uproar with some of our advertisers who weren't expecting that. And we had to try to figure out how are we going to combat this while we know Amazon is doing the right thing by prioritizing these essential products. How can we still make it so that our advertisers and our small businesses are still getting the visualization they need online and that their brand doesn't take a hit? A lot of different things were affected, from not getting those orders to their ASINs not being essential, and from there even inventory. A lot of these sellers are outsourcing and getting their products from overseas, and all of those places, all the other countries at the time, were shut down as well. So just even for them bringing their inventory over to the United States was a huge factor that we had to kind of get creative and figure out what can we do with what we have.
That's great. So Lance, talk a little bit about the impacts of working from home when you're used to having your team, you're meeting up at the single location, and now having to do, especially when you're dealing with interns. What has it been like for you to now be doing this remote work instead of being like in the same space as your team members?
Yeah, it's super interesting because work from home has been like, I'm just guessing, but like 75% of where I've had to do my work or be able to do my work. But then in the awkward position that restaurants and bars are in, some of it has actually been on site, or there's the awkward necessity of being present in the first place as a bartender or as a manager and whatnot. And so with that, I've seen with my own work, it almost being simpler communicating over particularly Slack. So we've been using Slack to get back to the original point that I'm kind of derailing off of. The team never really spent a ton of time together anyways, unless it was an event. So a lot of the training that we had done started before football season for the Coug in particular, for my media team. Started when I was actually trying to live in Vancouver about a year ago. So from the beginning, the structure of our team and the way we communicated was done remotely, which conveniently made 2020 a little more practical as things got really unsteady and kind of scary. Was that we already had the simple foundation of working remotely together in the first place. So we were able to build off of that fairly easily, or at least try to adapt. My team didn't have to worry about exposing themselves to anything unsafe or jeopardizing their own health or their family's health or their friends' health, because I ended up taking the brunt of that exposure and the brunt of that work by being close with both restaurants management as well as ownership, and being in the office or being on site to get content or communicate with specific people when necessary. So that worked really well a couple of weeks ago, week and a half ago-ish, 2 weeks ago, when the Coug had to shut down because of a COVID-19 case scare. That was probably the best. It is the best example of me having to work from home because the entire Coug staff was in self-quarantine for about 4 or 5 days. So all of the educational crisis communication and health communication that followed our initial post the same hour that we closed was done by me in collaboration with our team and management while I was in self-quarantine. It was all done I had a Chromebit that I plugged into my TV, wireless mouse and keyboard, a folding table that used to be used for beer pong, and popped that up in a small office space, and was able to pop those projects out as quickly as possible and remotely collaborate with a designer who was already used to and ready to create quickly and communicate with me via video conferencing, and then other former interns who were able to hop on board and help with social media and photo content that was necessary for communicating what we needed to.
That's great. Well, it's good. Maybe it was to your advantage that you had a little bit of a foundation then with already kind of working remotely as a team anyway, and then being able to pull together despite the pandemic.
Yeah.
So we do have a question from the gallery here. What advice would you give to this year's incoming seniors in Murrow that have lost out on internships this summer, who might be lacking work for their portfolio? What should they be doing right now to build their portfolio going into their last year? Rachel, why don't you start?
Yeah, absolutely. I was in a position, not because of COVID, but prior to me going into my senior year at Murrow, I was in a position where I was living in Pullman. I had a 5-year-old at home quite a bit of the time, and I was trying to figure out, how can I get experience and what can I do with, in Pullman, there are some limited resources when you're really not able to go to bigger cities and get those types of internships that a lot of these students probably had the opportunity of. So a little bit I can add here. Lance can probably add quite a bit more on this, but getting creative. So when I was a bartender at South Fork in Pullman, I found a need, and there's needs all over the place. There's going to be needs at, like Lance said, bars and restaurants who have no idea what they're doing when it comes to social media, and maybe they didn't even see that it was important before. And you can be that voice, and you can reach out to them proactively and say, hey, I have a skill set that could probably help you. Here's what I can bring to the table. And a lot of times, obviously, right now, they might not have the money for it to be a paid internship, but you're still going to be able to get that experience and be able to put that on your resume. And it'll show that you really set yourself apart during this time, I think. So however you can get creative and locally find restaurants or bars or any form of a company that needs representation who doesn't have a social media presence online, I think that's going to be a huge opportunity. And I think Lance could probably speak to that more, being that that's what he does.
Lance, do you have other things to add there?
Yeah, could you restate the question really quick so I can collect my thoughts?
Sure. The gist of it is that you've got these incoming seniors coming in tomorrow who maybe lost out on internships this summer. And so as they seek to build their portfolios, what are some of the things that they can do to add creativity or content to their portfolios as they go into their last year of college?
Yeah, I'm gonna speak specifically on what has worked for me in regards to just being more equipped for my work and the type of work that I've been able to adapt into. It's been less portfolio pieces per se and more just self-education and self-research, which I think is really valuable and can become portfolio pieces as you're taking a lot of free classes that exist right now or reading a lot of texts and whatnot. But I know what's made me so equipped for this year was while in school, and even the last couple of years as I've done more freelance work and agency work and whatnot, has been I really like to read. I really, really like to read. So I pick up a lot of books and I've read a lot on the different industries I've been interested in working with or plan on working with. So I have a lot of head knowledge regarding like restaurants and bars and breweries and dispensaries and different beverage companies and things like that. Things that intrigue me, really understanding what goes on behind the scenes and what the history of these industries are. And so that has allowed me to be equipped for a niche. And kind of like Rachel was saying, where she referenced her past work with South Fork, and Rachel and I actually became friends a long time ago when she worked at the Coug. And being active and present in the service industry in particular, and learning those things really gives an edge because you're forced to recognize needs in the moment and respond to them quickly, and learn what you need to either support that or move on to the next thing and do something that you're actually valuable at.
That's great. Thank you. Let's talk about some other things. So based on just your ability to make decisions on your own, so would you say that in this time of change and mandated adjustments in your job, do you prefer a more structured routine with leadership input or one that's more open and allows freedom to adapt? And maybe Rachel, you can start with that.
Oh, I was on mute. Okay. Yeah, for sure. I'm a routine person. So in college and work and my personal life, I value routine a lot. It reflects, for me, I'm a lot more stable. My head is a lot more clear. I'm able to make better work decisions when everything is organized and I'm in a routine. That being said, I'm fortunate enough to have a manager who really encourages us to find what works and then each individually do that. So we're going to be the most productive. So for me, I've really found value in using my work Outlook calendar, not just for work, but using it for my personal life too, because it allows me to see that it's not necessarily like all work and then I get off work and I get to have a personal life. But when I'm able to see all up, oh, I get to do this on the weekend and I get to hang out with my friends these days or exercise at this time in conjunction with, okay, I have 3 meetings back to back this morning. Instead of being stressed out about those 3 meetings, I get to see my day as a whole. And then it just makes my head, it's more clear for me. I'm in a better space mentally, and I'm really really lucky to have a manager that, as long as we're getting our stuff done, as long as we're meeting our deliverables, as long as we can find a way to do that that works for us, we're able to have that freedom. And for me, freedom is being my routine.
Yeah, that
So
works best for you. Lance, what about you? What is your leadership like? Do you have two bosses, or how's that working? I don't know enough about the structure of the coup and the land ownership wise, and how is your leadership structure?
Yeah, I do have one boss in particular that most of the work that I do is either seen by or run by or supported by. And then there's a handful of other individuals and key players that come into it, and do have a voice and change some of the things that I work on or do, especially with my team. But I'm thankful to say that particularly with those two businesses, I'm given a lot of freedom and authority to make decisions based on my intuition, and I've gained trust and proven that I'm equipped for what I'm doing. But personally, especially with the changes since March, because I'm given so much freedom and flexibility, I have learned that structure is very important for me, and it's been weird to not recreate, but create a new structure for myself. So my thoughts are all over the place. I talk a lot, I talk fast, I get a lot done, but it's a lot of fragmented keywords and things and whatnot. And a lot of people or that structure needs to anchor me down to actually get a lot of that done, which is weird. Or I feel like it's weird to say as a leader that that's a thing, but um, at the same time, it helps me at least lead my interns well. And so like that structure I've had to create for myself is kind of over planning to the point where the plans and the structures and the systems that I create for my own productivity and the Coug's productivity, since I don't have to report everything, um, is allowing it to be almost so simple that it can change. Like when I wake up at 6 in the morning and the entire world's different from when I went to bed at midnight. Like um, having a few things in place that allow that to change and me not lose my mind or be upset that like now my entire 2020 calendar doesn't matter anymore. Um, and having to change that every 2 or 3 hours, like it's simpler that way. And it's been helpful for me to not have to stop being a planner, just planning differently. And I think that's what allows me to work so well with different business owners and management teams, and then also still be able to lead other people beneath me, is that forced structure with flexibility.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about adaptability to change now as you guys are new in your careers versus when you were maybe in college. And how would you say, I mean, we could do it by a rank, like a scale of 1 to 10. How would you rank your adaptability to change now as new emerging professionals versus your adaptability to change when you experienced that in your college days? Rachel, go ahead.
It's funny reflecting on that. In college, I mean, I didn't have to be super adaptable. I didn't have to be super flexible because I knew what to expect every day. I knew what I needed to get done and I made a plan, and that was what it was. And my work life, especially in 2020, things are changing every day, every hour, oftentimes every 15 minutes. At Amazon, it's always changing. But truthfully, if I had to do a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say in college, maybe around a 5. And now in my work life, I would say a 10. I welcome change. I think that the most growth happens when we're put in positions that are uncomfortable. And while this pandemic is so unfortunate and awful for so many people, there is some good that can come out of it in terms of showing what we can do and where our creative abilities can really emerge, showing solutions for things we maybe never would have thought of in another situation. So just trying to think a little bit positively despite being stuck at home and having to isolate. This has been a really cool experience to see how many minds can just work together to create solutions when we have never been in this position before.
Lance, what about you and your adaptability from how you dealt with change in college from how you feel like you're dealing with it now as a emerging professional?
College was a mess for me for sure. Focusing in general, but also just having to change because of just the way my brain works and the way I talk and interact with people. Things were changing all the time, but I wouldn't say it was stable change. And I say that in the best way possible because college has just so many different opportunities, and the classes change all the time, and the types of work that you can get done in classes on your own and in groups is always shifting. But I would say every time I changed in college, there was a long fallout of me trying to make that change normal instead of just accepting that change is a part of growth and building. I always assumed that change was a kind of a reset point. when I was in college. So now in 2020, or even 2019 and 18, as I've moved farther away from being a college student, I still feel like a student with how much the world's changing. But understanding that my focus is just different. I have a different purpose now that I'm actually in a career field or a chosen career field, and having to make those choices. The breadth of opportunity is just as big now, but it feels a little more limited and a little riskier now that I'm not in as safe of a space as a college with a built-in curriculum and things like that. So there's not as much of a safety net to fall into.
I think that's probably encouraging for people to hear, because I think in college one might not see themselves as really adaptable to change. They sort of feel like they're forced into change versus it being like a personal choice. But then as you get into your career and as you start to develop your own sort of work ethic and you start to work in real teams versus these kind of course-based teams, that adaptability maybe becomes a little bit more natural and a little bit more organic versus feeling so forced. And I think that's encouraging to hear that from you.
More organic.
Yeah, more organic. Let's talk a little bit about this buzz term disruption, as we hear it all the time. I'd love to hear about a time that you were maybe forced to meet some scheduled deadlines, but your work was constantly being disrupted. And what was maybe an example of the most difficult challenge that you've faced over the last 3 months, given that this is, such a hot topic right now with the pandemic and all of us. I mean, this is very much of a shared experience of disruption. So maybe, Rachel, can you just start with what's an example of a difficult challenge that you've had to face and maybe how you overcome it?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, well, now I've grown to love working from home. When I first transitioned from being in the office mentality and that environment, transitioning to working from home, there are so many disruptions that I never even knew could happen. Anything from our 5-month-old puppy needing to go out every hour to my 5-year-old wanting to show me her newest obstacle course. But really, what I found has grounded me and enabled me to be productive still is kind of how this goes back to my routines and all that jazz, but is finding a way to kind of tier the things that I need to get done throughout the day, and knowing that and expecting that disruptions are going to come, instead of getting frustrated that something takes me away from my work for 15 or 20 minutes, knowing that I'm flexible and I'm adaptable and it's going to be just a matter of reorganizing a couple of things in order to get something done. I do have a system that I use, and it's kind of in a 4-quadrant method, but it basically goes from this is really important and I need to get it done right now to this can wait and I don't need to do it today or even tomorrow, but by the end of the week. And having my system works really well for when I'm faced with disruptions throughout the day.
That's great. I use a tool called To Do. I think it's an Office 365 tool. And so I know like what are the 4 things I need to do today.
Totally.
And then if I get other things done, fantastic. And then I can deal with the disruptions a lot better than just everything being on the A list, right?
Absolutely.
So Lance, what about you? Example of a time that you just really felt disruption, a challenge, and maybe how you overcame it in the last 3 months. I bet you have a lot of examples, actually.
I do have a lot of examples. The 2 biggest ones, and I'm only gonna go deep into one of them now, but the 2 biggest ones were at the beginning of the shutdown, or the COVID-19 announcement, and then the second being the Coug shutting down a couple of weeks ago for COVID. But the first instance was definitely as Inslee was making announcements back in March. I remember I was out of town during WSU spring break. And so I came back, or no, it was right before the spring break, before I left. The Coug had a normal event, like they do, a tradition of a St. Patty's Day pre-funk. Building was very busy, a lot was going on. I was very distracted by that. And then I think it was the next day or like during the event, Inslee announced the shutdown that was coming up and the things that were going to be happening with people getting unemployed and all this other stuff. And it's kind of a blur to me at this point. I don't remember the exact timeline of things. But I do remember that weekend in particular, I think it was a Monday because I didn't leave until Monday or Tuesday. I had a 19-hour day with management, and that was a huge disruption. One, the quantity of work, but also all the stuff we had to go over. I was exposed to a lot of different things on the ownership level and management level, and things that I'm thankful I was exposed to. It was a lot to handle mentally and emotionally, and I was there as people were being laid off or let known that they were going to be coming back on staff later. But as just things were changing, management being insecure about things, and people having to step in and actually make some pretty clear, hard decisions, and that translated and was communicated in the transparency that we had on social. And so I don't think I've still yet recovered mentally from understanding how to be given that much valuable insight and responsibility, and literally having everybody decide to rally together and figure out all the essential employees rallying together to figure out what was going to happen just for that day, let alone what was going to happen that next week, and what we could try and figure out long term. So
it's certainly crisis response in real time.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of us were trained for that.
No, like the closest thing I remember to stress like that was as a kid with 9/11, and I know it was a very different circumstance, but like that just immediate gut reaction, that immediate necessity to figure out like, okay, we get the world's different now. How do we respond to it? And terrorism and a pandemic are two wildly different things, but it was weird in that moment as someone in their mid-20s, me trying to be like, cool, closest relation I have to this is being a little kid watching the news in my family. Like I'm not actually prepared for this, but I have to be.
Right. So maybe that's a nice segue. We've got a question from the chat. What skills do you think are most important now when applying to jobs, especially kind of in this? I mean, we're not really post-pandemic, or we're still in the middle of it. So during pandemic and what will hopefully eventually be post-pandemic, what skills do you think are most important when applying for jobs? Rachel, why don't you start?
Yeah, for sure. Wow, that's a big question, especially given the current situation. But I think if I had to pick, maybe not one skill, but a couple, I would say for me, what I've noticed in the last year, starting my professional career and throughout development, a skill that I've really come to value and feedback I've gotten from my managers and their managers has been how important it is to be self-aware and adapt to that feedback. So I think showing future employers how willing you are to hear what they're saying and really listening, maybe during an interview or doing a phone screening, just making sure you're listening fully to their questions and to what they're asking you, and then responding in a way that you think reflects who you are rather than what you think they want to hear. Because a lot of times people can see through that scripted, well, I know this question, I know I should answer it like this, but if it's not genuine to who you are, that's going to also show through. I think right now, personality matters a lot. I mean, it always does matter, but especially during this time of constant change and disruption and really, truly a scary time. People want to know, employers want to know who they're hiring as somebody who is honest and truthful, adaptable, and willing to change and work on feedback.
And Lance, I want you to answer the same question, but one thing I would note is that I think one of the things that our emerging professionals and our students who are currently in their programs really need to take a minute and journal a little bit about this pandemic, because I think a top question that's going to happen in upcoming internships and jobs is, what was your experience during the pandemic? How did you respond to change? How did you adjust? Did you lose that internship? Did you lose that job? Did you have to move back home with mom and dad or other family members? And what was your response to it? Because I think that question is going to become a staple in this new era. So Lance, go ahead, answer the same question on what skills you think are most important now when applying for jobs.
That's a really interesting question. I don't know if I have a full or complete answer on it, especially since I haven't had to hire recently or been on that side of looking for particular skill sets or wanting people to join my team. But something that I have noticed on my end of interacting with more business owners and more management teams, particularly the last couple of months, people asking me to work with them or for them, or to advise them, to consult. a lot of, they're all, it's consistent across the board, looking for someone that they can trust. And I know there's a lot of different ways to show people that you're someone that's trustworthy, but everyone's looking for someone, and Rachel just said it too, that they can trust, that they can rely on, even potentially be capable of planning, because planning, I believe before this was a very underrated comfort, the ability to plan. And especially for, like, I've realized it as someone who plans a lot and works well with people who plan well, is that back to that point of being adaptable with planning, and planning to have to plan differently. Everybody's looking for that, and everybody's been asking that of me, and with me, and still demanding it of me, is knowing, either through the way that I act, or the words that I say, or even the work that I'm doing with other people, that I'm showing these other business owners and management teams, having something translate through it that says, I won't hurt you, you won't hurt me. We're in this together. As tacky as I know that is, and it's being said a lot, it's very real, and people need a sense, even in the professional realm, of community, and of some type of family that you can work with and for, and go up against the weird stuff we're dealing with in the world right now.
If you guys were to put your college student hat back on for a second, what advice would you have for students that are about to enter into an unknown fall? Are they going to be in person? Are they going to be online? Are they going to be hybrid? Are they going to be able to live with roommates? Are they going to have to stay home? If you were kind of back, and it's your junior or senior year, what advice would you sort of be, like, what narrative would you be giving to yourself as you think about heading into this next year, or at least the fall of unknowns? Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, for me personally, a year ago when I wasn't dealing with the pandemic and trying to get a job during this crazy time, I was still feeling really nervous about how I was going to respond. For me, my Amazon interview was 4 loops that were 45 minutes each, back to back, over video chat. So I was really, really nervous about that. But now, if I had to layer on, well, there's a pandemic and there's a lot of people that want this job too. What would I say to myself would be, everybody is experiencing this change right now, not just us, not just the students, but the interviewers, the managers that are hiring. Everybody is going through a weird time. And I think everybody's a little bit nervous, right? On edge, not quite sure what to expect. So maybe take comfort in knowing that you're not the only one that is in this unprecedented time. And there are still jobs and people still want to hire students. We just have to figure out the right way to go about interviewing, the right way to go about answering those questions online, and try to take comfort in the fact that it's unprecedented for everyone, and everybody's a little bit nervous right now too.
That's great. Lance, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm going to ask you to say the question one more time. So I got so caught up listening to Rachel, I don't.
That's okay. I was just saying that if you were a college student right now, what's the narrative that you would sort of be giving to yourself as, like, you're heading into this fall of unknowns, and whether your classes are going to be online or in person or hybrid, where you're going to live, how you're going to work. Just what advice would you sort of be giving to yourself to get through it?
Yeah, so I would probably say two things, particularly to myself, but really anybody dealing with the insecurities of, like, just after college in general. Like, it was scary before a pandemic. Can't even imagine it now, way scarier now. And I didn't take the best care of myself in college, but I did get through college healthy for the most part, and found a lot of people, thankfully, accidentally and on purpose, who cared about me. So the two things that I would be encouraging myself right now, graduating college in the middle of a pandemic and looking for work, is paying attention to how you take care of yourself, and then paying attention to who actually genuinely cares about you and what you're doing right now or trying to do. Because what I'm noticing is that a lot of people's priorities are shifting, and the way they interact with people is different. And I'm seeing in my own life, professional and personal, certain people that I thought valued my work and the things that I'm doing with my personal growth, they're not. And then other people are, that I didn't expect, or people that I did expect, and really holding on to that value and trying to value back and forth with it, and then making sure that I'm healthy enough to not let the weight of the world hurt my mental health too much, and my mental health impact my physical health and spiritual health and whatnot. Making sure that that foundation exists before actually figuring out what's next can be really helpful and healthy. It's what's helping me now in my career, and I think it would have helped me really well coming out of college too.
Yeah, I think that's great advice coming from both of you. So, how about a time that you had to adapt to a particularly difficult situations and maybe a difficult situation, excuse me, and what steps that you took to manage it? Can you think of an example? It doesn't even have to be in the last 3 months. It could be before that, but just an example of um, a really tough situation and how you chose to manage it. Rachel, do you have an example?
Yeah, for sure. It actually is. It's a recent example based off of the pandemic. So half my job at Amazon is sales, half my job is strategy. So I do both of those things together. And what that means is there are daily situations that come up that are difficult. But what I've learned that is kind of the Amazonian way is to start with the problem and work backwards. So a big picture example would be if we were to start with the customer and work backwards. What's a customer problem that existed? It was that people couldn't get there are things they were ordering online to their doorstep in time. So what did Amazon develop? Amazon Prime. They figured out a way to make that happen. And of course, there's a ton of stuff that happens on the back end. But for me specifically, a day-to-day example would be my advertiser tells me that they have a $10 million sales goal for the end of 2020. I'm going to ask the questions of, okay, well, what's our daily purchase rate? How much does an item cost? Then I can figure out how many impressions do we need to serve in order to find the right strategy. So really starting from that problem. The problem was the $10 million sales goal. How are we going to back into an answer? And I think starting from the problem and working backwards is always the way to do it.
That's great. Lance, do you have anything to add to that on a particularly difficult situation and steps you took to manage it?
It's kind of a different circumstance, but everybody, so like when the Coug closed, the only spot we got negative reactions from were on Twitter. Because Twitter is just, that's where you go for personality, that and TikTok. So trolls immediately popped up, and trolls are hard to manage face to face or even digitally. And so the reason I bring that up is that people talking negatively about you or your business, your integrity, the way you handle things, can be a very emotional experience. I think everything we're going through in 2020 is an emotional experience, but emotions make work a lot harder, especially when you have to react like that. And so recently for me, that was the only genuinely difficult situation to manage, where it was like, cool, I want to tell this person to F off. I need to run things by management and ownership, and I know how they'll respond, but like, what's the appropriate way to do this? Is there a way to leverage it in a way that actually educates the public and continues to do what we're trying to do to promote what we're doing to be safe and healthy? And so I believe the way I chose to go about that worked really, really well. It was basically politely telling people to F themselves. But I also work for a restaurant and bar, so I had the freedom to do that, which was cool. Not everybody can, especially when they've got bureaucratic stuff to work through. So, but yeah, that was a really hard, impulsive decision. It was very emotional, and I think it could have been handled a lot more poorly, and it was handled well. And that's a case by case thing that has to be tackled. But being conscious of the fact that emotions are difficult to handle is a really good thing going into a situation like that, any difficult situation, and being okay with overthinking it to a fault and then reacting appropriately with a little bit of logic and a little bit of emotion and impulse if necessary.
I thought, Lance, that one of the things that the Coug did that, at least in this community, that I think was probably really challenging as a decision to make, because it was sort of setting precedents for the community, was the Coug had got word that a patron had tested positive for COVID and had to make that decision to basically shut down and isolate the employees. And it's one of those moments where you're saying, well, gosh, haven't we all been exposed? Every place we go, the grocery store or the local coffee shop or whatever, as every day we hear more and more cases kind of coming up that we've probably all maybe been exposed. And so how did you feel about having to make that hard choice of shutting down, knowing that it was going to set probably some precedents for the entire community of Pullman?
The decisions I and ownership and management made were interesting, and I'm really proud of the decisions that we made, because long term, ever since early March, it's been a collective decision to be as transparent as possible, no matter what the risks are, whether it's public image or other issues, customers or potential patrons not wanting to visit, whatever. So in that moment, I don't think it was a terribly hard decision for anybody. It was just stressful knowing that the decisions we were making were going to, they were setting a precedent for ourselves. We already had most of the decisions prepared ahead of time. But I know we didn't think until several days later about the fact that we were setting a precedent for the community. We were more concerned with the safety and health of our staff and patrons. And in that, we're focused on what we had to take care of first and who we were. And I think that indirectly shows how much we care about everybody else, and the ripple effects of that. So it's convenient that there's positivity attributed to our decisions, but it wasn't difficult. It was just chaotic. We knew
it was a lot to deal with. And I think, Rachel, Amazon similarly dealt with some precedent setting activities, both with deciding to, this model of Prime where everybody's kind of ready for that immediate gratification, and then having to take a pause and say only the essential items were going to get delivered right away. But I imagine that you, coming from the side of sales and advertising, also dealt with your particular clients and vendors really struggling with, are they going to pull their advertising for a time, especially in the other unrest that's going on with Black Lives Matter and some of the other social activism happening. So we've got pandemic and we've got social activism all going on at the same time. How were your advertisers sort of responding, and how did you have to kind of manage that process?
Yeah, so that's a great question. For us, and the way that my team handled it, all the teams across North America had a very similar approach, where we were encouraged to be, totally understanding. Like, these businesses are a livelihood for a lot of people, and if it doesn't make sense for them to spend right now, then it doesn't make sense for them, and it's not going to be a position where I'm put in that I have to force them to anyway. There is a lot of data that I was able to show where, in times of previous examples like the recession, for example, the companies and businesses who were able to continue to advertise came out on top when it was over. So there were talking points that I could use that made sense, but truthfully, everybody was very understanding, and it was kind of refreshing. The advertisers that I work with are all great people, and they're great to work with, and they understood where Amazon was coming from. That decision with the priority, we call them ASINs, but products specifically, it was received very well across the board, even though it was definitely a bummer for them personally.
Yeah, I can imagine. So just for those who are watching, just giving you a little timeline, we've got about 10 minutes left. So if there's any other questions you have for our panelists, this is a great time to ask them. I'm going to go ahead and ask another one while so as we're continuing on here. Kind of taking a step back, a little bit off topic from what we've been talking about, but how would you describe your transition from college to your first job, and what particular challenges did you face, and how did you respond to them? So maybe Rachel, go ahead and start. What was your first job? Wasn't Amazon your first job post-college, if memory serves?
Yeah. It was exciting. I think the transition itself, I was ready to be done with school. I was excited to get into real life, as they say, a big kid job. And I was very fortunate to take a class that got me the interview ultimately at Amazon. The thing that I struggled with, I will say, was prioritization. And what I was doing in my daily life at work compared to my daily life in school. So I had a system that worked for me in school. I knew what to do. I think I mentioned this earlier. I kind of had my checklist and I would get it done, and then I'd go do my job at the bar. At Amazon, it's not that easy. There are a lot of things that demand my attention at all different points throughout the day. And that prioritization model I was actually taught in a training my first or second week at Amazon that has really helped me respond to that challenge. So I'm able to now pretty quickly decide what box is this going to go into, which then determines, do I do this right now or can I do this at the end of the week? And that has really helped me with that challenge of prioritization.
That's great. And Lance, you had a kind of a non-traditional path, didn't you? You almost went right into you did a lot of freelance and you did a lot of contract work versus like a traditional 9-to-5 pathway. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, it's been chaotic in a really fun way the last couple of years, for sure. I definitely like jumping from project to project, so there's been some cool flexibility there. But I'm also lucky in the sense that some of the clients and some of the projects I've been able to work on long term, like the Coug, for example, were relationships with people and businesses that I established while in college that I was able to continue to leverage over time into the niche that I now have with kind of small business hospitality marketing. Because when I was in college, I was convinced I was going to go into journalism. And then towards the end, when I got the other degree in PR, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with that, but I wanted to tell different stories. So yeah, it's been cool that like last year in 2019, I tried moving to Vancouver, closer to family, Vancouver, Washington, and start up there and do things differently there. And now I'm back in Pullman and very happy with the businesses I'm able to support, the people I'm able to support. And now I have multiple clients and I'm in the process of working towards having my own agency at some point. So it's neat to see that so much freelance work and contract work and just networking and building relationships can help me pay my bills. I haven't saved a ton yet, but still paying that college debt and whatnot, and be able to thrive in like you said, an untraditional way where I don't feel like I've missed out on too much. And it's neat being able to work for myself in a lot of ways and speak on my own behalf and still be able to stay so closely tied with an industry I'm passionate about and work I'm passionate about without having those other more traditional roles that work really well for a lot of people. And I learn a lot from those people like Rachel, her work.
Well, you're certainly an example of someone who has embraced opportunities as they came up and having to overcome fear with that, which I think is really commendable. Let's see. Oh, we've had a couple of questions. Okay, so I'm a student at WSU hoping to join Murrow College. What classes did you find to be most useful and prepared you in your professional life? Rachel.
Well, for me, I think it's kind of a given that e-commerce class is kind of how I got my job. I'm not sure what that's looking like right now. I truthfully don't even remember the number of the class. But for e-commerce, if that's what you want to get into, I learned a tremendous amount from that class, specifically in direct relation to Amazon. Now, aside from that, I think all the classes I took my last 2 years, I really enjoyed 310. I enjoyed all of Rebecca's classes. And I'm not just saying that, I actually had a really good time. You got to learn, I learned in Rebecca's classes specifically, really how to work with a group and how to do that creatively as well as collectively in person. So we had Vista Bar and Grill was our project in Rebecca's class, and coming up with a business and then figuring out what we were going to do and how we were going to advertise it on Facebook and work with a group to do that and collaborate is a skill that I still use every day at Amazon. So yes, but I know I just said 3 classes, but all of those are fantastic.
Good. I'm glad that it's always wonderful to hear that. And I know, Lance, you were also in 310, and you guys, I can't remember what yours was. I know you guys did it on Squarespace, but I can't remember the business.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of
Brew. It was a beer or something.
Yeah, a canned wine thing for college football. But
yeah,
to echo Rachel briefly, and then my second set of classes I think are really valuable. To echo Rachel is that classes that force you to take real world experiences and work in a group, as much as that sucks, group projects suck. Working with other people sucks, especially in college while we're all just all over the place as people in our classes and whatnot. Those were incredibly valuable. It's just made me such a good team leader and be able to work so well with different organizations and teams as well. Being forced to work through that discomfort was really, really good in a creative way as well. So very thankful for that. If you can find any classes like that, do that. But the other most valuable set of classes I took were actually my third major, which was women's studies, gender studies. A lot of those classes that diversified my experiences and how I thought about the world in regards to race and gender and identity and just kind of the psychology of humans and how we interact and sociology and all that stuff. A lot of extra topics that really fleshed out who I am as a person and how I'm able to think about things and work with my intuition. And those extracurricular studies, as long as you're genuinely interested in them, go a really long way. And I'm very thankful for that. And I would encourage doing that as early as a freshman. When I was a freshman, I took a family studies class, and that's what got me diving deep into it. So.
Yeah, good to diversify. Lance, there was a question that was specific for you, and then we're going to have to start to wind things down. Lance, how many brands are you working with now? And do you see yourself having the ability to add any more locally or out of the area?
Currently, I work with 4. I'm in the process of starting to work with a 5th out of state. One of the 4 I currently work with are out of state as well. So a lot of remote work. Really, the only local hands-on work I do is the Cookin the land. I'm open to a 5th, but I learned a long time ago, or not a long time ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago, to be careful about how much I choose to do or focus on, because then I end up burning clients or burning friends or just hurting myself in that sense by taking on too much work and allowing bad habits to get in the way of that stuff as well. So thankfully, I've learned from those experiences and have a cap for myself. So I know at least for the remainder of this year, I'll only be able to handle 5 clients, but I'm hopeful to grow and structure out, particularly with my own team at some point, to be able to grow, like I mentioned before, as an agency and be able to take on more clients and more work and be able to diversify that client base.
But making a good point about, trying to be all things to all people is a slippery slope. So good to know your limits and then seek to grow and bring in other people to help you out. So we're down to the final 2 minutes. Do either of you have any final words regarding adaptability to change, or any other parting advice for the group?
I can start, Lance, if that's okay. I know I've said this probably 3 times already over the course of the last hour, but just embracing the change and embracing who you are right now is so important, because you're a good one and people are going to see that, and employers are going to see where your heart is in addition to where your skill set is, and that really does matter, and I don't think it's talked about enough. So just keep fighting the good fight, and it's all going to work out.
And the only thing I would like to add or reinforce, I guess, because I mentioned it before already, is really focusing right now on your mental and emotional and physical health. People might not notice it, and that's fine. But we're all anxious and stressed right now and potentially depressed and a lot of other things. Something that before a lot of us chose to or not to talk about, we're all now experiencing, even if we weren't before, and we're all very vulnerable. And that's okay. And that's good. And not letting that overwhelm you is the only way we're going to be able to effectively and efficiently get through this together, because there's no clear end in sight, but it is closer than I'm sure any of us expect. So just really, really take care of yourself, because you can't take care of other people if you're not okay. I mean, you can a little bit, but at some point you're going to burn out and not be able to help them. So take care. Great
advice. Thank you guys so much for being here, and thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.